where appropriate. Now let's get to our discussion today on global supply chain and the impact COVID-19 has had on the distribution of goods and services, supply and demand of those goods and services. And today we're talking with the leaders that are in it every day. We're going to be hearing from Bruce Hoechner. He is the president and CEO of Rogers Corporation. Ken Stacherski, he is vice president of supply chain at Honeywell Aerospace, and Mark Smith, vice president of supply chain at Carlisle Company. So I want to start with Bruce. Bruce was elected as president and CEO of Rogers Corporation in 2011. Wealth of experience in the specialty chemicals industry across numerous geographies and businesses. He spent 10 years of his career working in Singapore, Thailand, China for Rohm and Haas Company that was recently acquired by Dow Chemical Company, whom he was with for 28 years. Bruce was most recently the president of the Asia Pacific region for the Dow Advanced Materials Division, where he oversaw operations in Europe, North America, Latin America, and Asia. So right now I want to send it over to Bruce. And Bruce, can you just kind of give us a state of the impact right now, what the COVID crisis has done for the Rogers Corporation global supply chain?
So thanks, Eric. Yeah, this has been obviously an unfolding situation. And for us, we're a global company. We have operations in China, South Korea, North America, and Europe as well. And we saw this coming in January in our situation in China. And what we did was put in place our business continuity team, which is essentially our executives, functional and business folks, to oversee and manage the situation. And what we saw was, first and foremost, really directing ourselves to focus on the safety and health of our employees. And so that's been a big concern of ours in China. We have moved through that by having some of the government mandated regulations in place and social distancing and so forth. Obviously, that's moving through to North America, Europe as well. The impact on the supply chain. Things like ability to move goods in and out of China first hit us. Having multiple sites that could manufacture products has been helpful for us as a company. So having materials qualified to produce in Europe instead of China, for example, has enabled us to continue to support our customers. I think the other thing that's important is from the supply side, having ability to multi-source from different regions for supply, as well as different companies, has been extremely important, because in some cases, some companies have been shut down. In other cases, some regions have been isolated and shut down. And so ability to move back and forth has been something that's helped us, and certainly is a learning for us as we move forward. So the impact on us also has been to accelerate and really work more closely with both our customers on the demand side to really understand what they're seeing in demand, then taking that back through the supply chain to our raw material suppliers, making sure we understand their situation, their ability to supply, timing and so forth, and ensuring that also the information that's flowing is the latest information. For many companies, having systematized ERPs that automatically replenish orders and so forth, there's a very critical issue here of not ordering the wrong thing automatically. So manual intervention has taken place there. The other thing that's very important in a crisis like this is cash generation and not consuming cash at a time like this. So things like building inventories are something you might want to do if you have a single sourced raw material, just to make sure you have some. But if you think your supply chains are pretty secure, making sure that you're conserving cash and not building inventories, both on the raw material side as well as the finished goods side, is important, because of course we don't know how long this situation will last, nor do we really understand how the demand constraints or demand will actually work through the system and what time frame. So those are some of the things that have affected us in the way that we've changed the way we operate.
Bruce, quickly, what are ERPs? You mentioned systemized ERPs. What are those?
So a systemized ERP, it's basically a computer system that monitors the inventories, monitors supply and demand information, and then will automatically calculate what you need in terms of replenishment of raw materials to meet the supply that's needed for your customers.
Got it. Okay, Bruce, thank you. We're going to be joining you again here just in a few moments to go over some Q&A. But for now, I want to send it over to Ken Stacherski at Honeywell. He is the Vice President of Integrated Supply Chain for Honeywell's Aerospace business, headquartered here in Phoenix, Arizona. In this role, he's responsible for all aspects of the aerospace global integrated supply chain, including manufacturing, quality, repair and overhaul, the Honeywell operating system, planning, sourcing, procurement, health and environmental safety, facilities and materials, supply chain management. So Ken, just like, we sent it over to Bruce to talk about the impact on Rogers Corp. Tell us about the impact right now on Honeywell's aerospace supply chain.
Well, thanks, Eric. You made that sound impressive. I appreciate that overview. So very similar to what Bruce was sharing. It all started for us with the focus around our people. First and foremost, we've got to take care, and it's always been the practice at Honeywell to take care of the health and safety of our people. So that's what we started. We've been into this for multiple weeks now because, again, just similar to Bruce's conversation, we've got the Honeywell Aerospace business is about $14 billion globally. We do a lot of both aerospace and defense work. So we've been watching this and monitoring our supply base when this all started in Wuhan, back in the December, January timeframe. So, many actions that we've taken to proactively ensure the health and safety of our people, everything from, extra cleaning within our sites to social distancing in our cafeterias, in our workspace. We've relayed out several of our assembly areas and work areas. We've gone to temp screening every time you come in and out of the building for all employees. Of course, all of those non-essential plant employees are all work from home. Anything and everything that we could basically do to get people out and away from the critical operations. Because we are considered by the U.S. Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security as critical infrastructure. So us and our supply base are necessary that we keep critical operations functional around the world. So as you can imagine, we've got a huge effort between our government relations teams, our legal teams to help not only our sites and local governments, but also our supply base to be able to stay open and do anything and everything proactively to help make sure that those critical few that we do need, that we're taking into account their health and safety to keep them healthy. So fortunately, all the proactive steps that we've taken now for several weeks have been helpful. Of course, it in itself is not flawless. Unfortunately, we have had some cases throughout our supply chain. I've got about 15,000 people globally. And we've got about 118,000 in the entire of Honeywell. And so far, we've been fortunate. No deaths. We've had 38 cases around the world of Honeywell employees. So, very, very fortunate. I think in the bigger scheme of things, as we all try to deal with this around the world. Some of the things that are quite exciting that we are trying to do to be part of the solution. You maybe have seen we had our chairman on with the President of the United States talking about some of the things that we're doing on the N95 mass production, of course, which we're bringing to the Phoenix Valley. So we're creating about 500 jobs. That was announced about a week or two ago, creating about 500 jobs in the Valley to build some of the critical PPE. We're doing this in many places around the world to help other governments and other local areas to make sure that they've got the health and safety equipment, to be part of the solution. We're also working on respirator supply. We do a lot of oxygen sensing, as you can imagine, for the Department of Defense. So we do have some of the critical technology that could be helpful to help build out the supply base quite quickly, and we're scaling that around the world to again try to help be proactive and do our part to be part of the solution. So those are a few of the things that we're doing, while we're trying to support our critical infrastructure. I mean, we all rely on, whether we realize it or not, we rely on airplanes flying in the air to bring us bring us food from everywhere around the world, as an example, and we're doing all we can to keep our employees safe while we're keeping critical parts in operations for the various carriers. So with that, Eric, I think that about wraps it up. I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to hit on that real quick again, because being part of the solution, and it has been all over the news recently. And I forgot the specific number. Isn't it 6 million masks? Isn't that what you guys are hoping to produce over the next year to help our healthcare workers with the PPE?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely in the millions, Eric. I mean we've got a variety of sites that we're ramping up. I'd rather not quote the specific number,
Sure.
because we've got several other things that we're doing that are yet unannounced. But, yeah, there's a lot of things that folks are doing that are some great ideas, and every bit helps. We know that this is gonna scale in a big way, and that's really where we're trying to help, because I mean the mass count clearly around the world is in the tens of millions in the need. And that's kind of what we're trying to focus on, is how can we help at the mass scale. So yeah, we're going to be a sizable impact. And the good news is, for the Phoenix areas, we're going to do it right here in our own backyard.
Well, we appreciate that, Ken, and we'll check in with you in just a few moments for some Q&A. Okay, let's go over to Mark with Carlisle Companies. Mark Smith is the Vice President of Supply Chain at Carlisle Companies. Carlisle Companies is a diversified global portfolio of niche brands and businesses that manufactures highly engineered products and solutions for its customer base. In 2019, Carlisle Companies generated $4.8 billion in revenue. And Mark, we were just chatting before we went on here about some of the impact you're seeing, and so I'll just kind of give you the floor and let you go. And similar to what Ken was just saying, tell us about what's going on over at Carlisle Companies. And just bear with us, as I think we need Mark to unmute his computer there. I think the GPEC team can send him a message and let him know.
So I have a few slides that I want to go over that might help tell the story. And actually, Eric, you sort of started with my introduction, but I think some of the key words there in what Eric was saying was diversified, global, niche brands of highly engineered products and solutions. And those words will come back to us a little bit later in this presentation, because obviously they create opportunities as well as challenges in the supply chain. Next slide, please. So as you can see, Carlisle, which is located headquarters in Scottsdale, has 4 main divisions. I won't go through each division, but the products are vast and large variety of products, range from commercial roofing, specialty polyurethane, architectural metal, aerospace, medical technologies, defense, transportation, industrial, protective coatings, auto refinishing, agriculture, and construction. So this diversified products mean that we have an extremely diverse global and complex supply chain. So COVID-19 has really challenged us to do a deep dive into the supply chain and work more closely with our suppliers. And as it was said earlier, work on multiple qualifications and approvals. Next slide, please. So what's also challenging is, a global company. We have close to 150 locations, 50 locations in the US, and with other locations in the UK, Germany, Netherlands, Italy, Romania, India, China, Japan, and South Korea. And a lot of our locations, as well as in the United States, are, have received the stay-at-home orders, mandating that our facilities, be down unless they're proven essential. We've been fortunate enough that our facilities have been deemed essential. Similar to the earlier discussions, we had a plant in Dongguan, China that was closed for 2 weeks, but they're now up and running. We have a plant in Orzinuovi, Italy that had been shut down for a few weeks and is expected to return next week. And our plant in Nogales, Mexico The Sonoran government has closed it for the whole month of April. So a lot of challenges. You know, can we make products at other locations? Can we get raw materials to those other locations that might be making those products? But again, you know, we've been deemed essential. We've drafted letters to all of our key suppliers that indicate that, so they can use this document to go and hopefully allow them to stay open to keep supplying us with the critical raw materials. Next slide, please. So obviously, you know, as Ken said, our most important issue and our most important focus is our workforce. Our workforce is where we got, you know, how we got to where we are today and how we're going to get to the future. So we've been very communicative with our workforce, trying to be fair and equitable. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you know, we've eliminated basically all travel, all international travel, all non-essential US travel. We started with all indirect laborers working from home. You know, we have a very strict cleaning and social distancing policies to protect the employees, and we restrict our facilities to only essential visitors, and they must complete a health questionnaire before entering. This is key, and I think one of the things that isn't on this slide is that our president and CEO issues a weekly coronavirus update to all employees. And this is sort of unites the employees. It's a very good, it's a one-page document. It could talk about how, you know, an operation in France might be supporting an operation in Italy while they're down. You know, there's a lot of good stories that are going on with our businesses. But he also talks about the reality of what's going on, and you know, we've been fortunate to, similar to Ken, we've only had a few associates that have tested positive. But our employees are the most important thing, and we keep them in the loop constantly. And I think the CEO letter is a great way to communicate with everyone. Next slide, please. So, you know, this is basically the premise of why we're all here. How's COVID-19 changed the supply chain for everyone? I mean, it just, you know, it's slowdowns, force majeures, plant closures, delivery delays, you know, you name it. You know, everybody was running along pretty smoothly, and then this unplanned pandemic just threw a monkey wrench into everything. We've been very fortunate through a few practices and some maybe luck. You know, this started in China, and right after the Chinese New Year. So we normally stock extra inventory with our China suppliers and China facilities right prior to the Chinese New Year, so that we can come out in case there's you know, delays in coming out of the Chinese New Year. So we were in a good inventory position. We were also working on, over the years, very aggressive multiple qualification and approvals. We're trying to get, you know, multiple sources for all raw materials that we have. We're not there yet, but that certainly has allowed us some flexibility during these times to move businesses around. Sometimes, as Bruce, I believe, said, that, you know, if it's a different country, it might be better. So we have worked well with our engineering groups to expedite some of these, and worked well with our customers where necessary in order to get the approvals. I know there was a few questions on logistics. International logistics has been challenging. Domestic freight, we're pretty good with that. We see a little bit of slowdown crossing the Mexican border and back, but the international shipping, I think the reduction of air freight has caused the container business to be in high demand. So containers are short, and which is leading to slower deliveries via containers. And, you know, the final bullet here, globalization's worst case. you know, this is, we all are, all these businesses are global. We have global suppliers, we have global customers, and that creates challenges. When things are going well, you know, we get the best suppliers in the world, but when things aren't going well, and you know, it's a logistical nightmare. And I think the way this has sort of come about is it's been sort of phased throughout the world. Started in China, so we had issues with the Chinese suppliers, then moved, you know, the United States, Europe. Europe's closing down while China's coming back. So it's sort of in waves that we have to manage that are causing some extra work. But we're managing. So next slide, please. So what are the positive impacts? You know, I mentioned the accelerated dual sourcing. I mean, I hate to take advantage. I think there's somebody said, never waste a good crisis. That might be a little harsh to say in this pandemic with so much damage being done. But it's also, we found that this is also a time to really work on, you know, the dual sourcing, work on systems, work on supplier partnerships to avoid these disruptions. Another positive impact is our medical business in China is extremely busy manufacturing patient monitoring systems and ventilation equipment for the tier 1 suppliers that will deliver it right to the front lines. We also have a supplier relationship program. That's what SRM is. And that sort of has been going on for a while. So it's a formal way to deal with our suppliers. So we've been in constant touch with them during good times. It's a quarterly basis. And this has provided better communication with these key suppliers. And we have found that they have really stepped up to providing us with raw materials. Next slide, please. This last slide. So what do we do? You know, there's all sorts of things that can happen in the supply chain. I mean, do we reward the suppliers that have stepped up and given us volume? Do we penalize the ones that don't? Do we give them a longer, you know, contract with the ones that have done well? It's not going to last forever. We are also taking a look at our infrastructure when, you know, sometimes they say, you know, let's send all non-essential folks home. That's sort of, to me, it's sort of ironic because if they're non-essential, why are they there in the beginning? So I think it's a lot, you know, it's taking a look at how we do business. And I also think there's going to be a little bit of a whiplash coming back. You know, there's going to be a huge demand and it's going to sort of, you know, go through the global economy and the global world with timing. And hopefully the demand and supply stay together so that we can continue to meet the customer demand. So I guess to wrap up, these challenges are significant. We have been in good shape so far. We look at things in 2-week increments, and but things are happening daily. I give a weekly update, and each update gets a little more detailed and a little more suppliers that have been shut down or more force majeure letters. So I'm not sure where it's going to go. I don't think anybody does, but so far we've been managing this well.
Mark, want to thank you for that, and we're going to start now with some Q&A, and sort of what you were just talking about. You showed the map there. You showed all the locations that you have around the globe and sort of the impact that you were seeing pre-COVID-19 versus post-COVID-19. And so I'll bring back in Bruce and Ken here. And Bruce, I guess I'll start with you. You know, as Mark mentioned, you know, we're seeing the resurgence in the Asian market while European market remains primarily shut down. What impact is that having for you guys?
So we are seeing a similar situation. China has been up and running now for probably at least a month, pretty much at relatively normal levels. Some of the impact, and I think Mark mentioned this, is some of the shipping issues that we've seen coming out of China, containers and so on. A lot of our materials, we are a specialty materials company, a lot of our materials are shipped via air freight. So with passenger jet traffic way down, the DHLs and the FedExes are the only ones that are really flying goods around the world. In Europe, we have continued to be able to manufacture. Part of the situation has been we've encountered some issues locally. For example, we have a German facility that's manufacturing power module equipment and components, and a number of our employees are on the come across the Czech border. That border has been shut down. Now we are, like the other businesses, essential suppliers, and so our folks do have letters to get across. But what we've been able to do is have employees wanting to volunteer to stay on the German side of the border for 2 weeks in hotels and so forth, so they can continue to work and continue to help support the customer base and so on. So there's been various things that have happened here, and our teams have been able to respond accordingly, as I outlined there.
Bruce, you just mentioned, and I'll bring Ken in as well. Mark mentioned this, slower deliveries. How big is the impact? How big is that ripple effect as we continue to struggle logistically with slower deliveries?
So I don't know, Ken, you want to get that? Go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it's going to really depend on the region, I think. But Bruce hit it. I mean, clearly, I'm not sure a lot of people realize just how much freight actually goes in the belly of an aircraft on a regular domestic flight, but it's pretty significant. We all rely on that on a daily basis. I can't say that it's been a massive impact to us, but it certainly has slowed deliveries, I think, just about for every industry, just because any international travel is down. I mean, some of the numbers, generally speaking, are 80+%, right, if not more. So it's very significant. There's a lot of grounded airplanes, and these are the ones that we've all been relying on. So some pretty significant impacts in the delivery. People are using alternate routes, charter planes, and so on to try to make up the difference. But it impacts just about each and every industry to be able to deliver. The other feed into that is just how many employees can you get. I don't know that I wouldn't classify Europe generally as being shut down. I mean, certainly parts of it, like Italy, are certainly much more impacted than some of the rest. We've been able to maintain operations for the most part, right? Except for, of course, there's a few hot spots where there are some differences relative to the outbreak and actions that have taken on there. But for the most part, Europe is functioning, and there's been a variety of different hotspots that we've had to deal with individually. But I'd say that also contributes to that slowdown, if you will, of the delivery of goods, both the part supply as well as how do I transport them to where I need them to be.
Well, we just got done talking about Asia and Europe, and we have a question that has come in, and I guess I'll ask Mark this first. Have you heard of any evidence of interruptions to supply chains between Canada and the U.S. Resulting from the travel restrictions between those two countries?
We don't do a whole lot of cross-border with Canada. We're more concerned about Mexico, but I have not heard of anything being affected with Canada-U.S. border.
Bruce, Ken, anything?
We're similar to Mark in the sense that we really don't have a lot of cross-border activity. What I will say is we've seen in the U.S. delivery trucking being an issue, getting drivers and so forth. Some of the issues between states on borders as well. We've seen that with employees, particularly up in the Northeast. People not able to cross borders easily without, I think we referred to earlier, some of the paperwork that's required for essential workers.
Yeah, we've got pretty sizable footprint in Canada across all of Honeywell, and I'd have to say, for the most part, all things considered, all of the issues around the world, the border between the U.S. and Canada is still probably one of the better all around. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not some level of delays, but certainly not in my top 10 concerns even. So I think as usual, the ability between the two countries to work through what's necessary to protect each and do the right things continues to, I think, to show well.
And here's a question that we have, and this could be a much longer discussion, but why is it so hard or cost prohibitive to make critical goods in the US versus overseas?
I mean, I can try that one first. I don't know that I fully agree with it. I mean, we've got a very strong supply base here in the United States. I mean, matter of fact, the largest part of my concentration of my supply base around the world is here. You know, each region has certain strengths. Each region has certain opportunities as you consider your supply base and where your end customer is. But you know, we're quite successful and have a very large footprint here in the U.S. I mean, we've got 12 facilities alone in the Phoenix area. So, and that's just Phoenix. So, you know, we're very much a believer in the U.S. footprint, but we've got global, a significant footprint around the globe. So I'm not sure I necessarily align with the question.
Mark?
Well, I think there's a few states in the United States that aren't quite as user-friendly as others. But in general, I mean, we do very well in the United States, and some of our other locations are there to support different geographical customers.
And Bruce, I'll give you a chance if you want to weigh in as well.
Yeah, and so very similar to what Ken said. I don't necessarily agree with that. We produce a number of intermediates here in North America that get shipped around the world, and obviously finished goods as well. We've been manufacturing here in Chandler for over 50 years. Our company's been around since 1832. A lot up in the Northeast. And a lot of what we do is dependent on where our customers are. And so if our customers are in Asia, we have co-located our facilities to produce for them as they develop their own markets and so forth.
And here's a question that just came in as well. You guys are all mentioning your footprints here in Arizona. This question says, what is the employment landscape, the talent landscape like in Arizona compared to some of the other markets that you're involved in? And I guess we'll start with you, Bruce.
So actually about 2.5 years ago, we've moved our headquarters from the Northeast of the United States to Arizona. One of the main reasons was the talent availability, both from an engineering perspective, proximity to California, and we've been able to attract folks from the western part of the United States to come here. It's a very attractive environment, living environment, and cost of living, and so forth. So we found it a very good place here in Phoenix to be able to recruit and hold folks.
And Mark, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I'd like to take a shot. I'm not in Scottsdale yet. I'm in the process of moving there, but I do know that we are beginning to recruit some college graduates in supply chain, and Arizona State has one of the top 5 programs in the country in undergrad supply chain. So we have hired people from there that are very good. And I think, well, I don't know whether you locate there because of that, but it's certainly nice to have a top 5 school there right next to our headquarters relative to supply chain.
And guys, I want to shift. We have another question that just came in. Based on what you've learned, and I'll start with Ken, based on what you've learned in the last few weeks, what steps can and should be taken to maintain our supply chain when another pandemic does occur?
Well, I think, you know, look, I mean, I think every government and every company is going to be much more prepared for the next one. Unfortunately, I think we all believe the next one's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So, you know, but I do think that some of the things are likely going to live through. Some of the preventive actions that we've all taken in some of our facilities to protect in the interim. I think some of those are going to live through as just the right practices to do that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened. I mean, you know, there's a tremendous amount of, you know, of effort around ensuring the social distancing, around making sure that we're having the right proactive measures on cleaning and from everything from cafeterias to the workspace that I think are just going to be part of a regular practice. It's not to suggest that they weren't good before. I mean, I've been to many manufacturing plants around the world, and they're all state-of-the-art, fantastic facilities. But it's really it's all those things at the next level. I think that's likely going to live through for the supply chain. Simply because until we get better clarity around this virus and a permanent vaccine to help the prevention, this isn't going to be we don't have the view that generally that this is a one and done. I mean, until we have a cure, it may be improving in China, and it's certainly looking like it's already starting to improve in Europe. But I think I don't think there's not a lot of popular opinion right now that suggests it's gone and not coming back.
Yeah, Bruce, it's sort of the same question there. All of you have mentioned, we're still in this weekly communication, sometimes daily communication. What have you seen over the past few months that has given you, confidence to know that, you guys will be prepared when this does happen again?
So this is, and this is very similar to Ken and Mark's position with their companies around safety, right? This is reinforced for us one of our core values at Rogers, which is employee safety and well-being. And, we continue to build upon that. And we've learned a lot, obviously, with the coronavirus situation, and we'll continue to move forward. I think some other things more related to the supply chain itself. Diversification of our supplier base, and there's two levels of it. Geographically, so you can have a supplier that's based in North America only and doesn't have capability in Europe and Asia. You have to look very carefully at that, because even if you have two suppliers that are both based in North America, they both could be shut down. And so you have to look at that mix and think carefully about how you qualify your suppliers. I think the flip goes for customers as well. We're in a lot of military, automotive applications around the world, medical applications, and getting our plants qualified at two plants qualified for one customer, different locations, different regions, is a lot of work and requires cooperation on both parties. And so I think coming out of this, we will see probably a lot greater coordination and communications and cooperation between customers, suppliers, ourselves, in terms of getting secondary sourcing identified. I think the third thing that I would talk about, which leading into the coronavirus was something that we were dealing with, was the trade war. And the trade war between China and the U.S., and we had been working through tariffs and looking at part of our activity was to look at where we could source our products from other plants and also our raw materials from other facilities, different regions, to minimize tariffs. I think that will continue, and I think we'll continue to see, particularly with China, a situation where we'll have a bifurcation of supply chains that will, for those strategic national security applications like 5G, is going to be identified within a country like China and outside in Western world, and we'll see that bifurcation. So there's multiple things that are at play here beyond coronavirus that are affecting supply chain as we move forward over the next year to 2 years.
And Mark, you may have mentioned it, I may have missed it in your slide presentation, but are you on the same in agreement there? The key is diversifying your supply chain.
Yes, I agree with everything Bruce said. I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, I think all supply chains need to come out of this stronger and think through it more differently. As Bruce said, do we now look at, if we're going to qualify two suppliers, as one in Asia and one in US, or one in Europe, one in US, versus, we have one on the coast of South Carolina, so we better get one in Midwest just in case a tornado comes through. So I think it'll strengthen processes and procedures. I think it'll push customers to demand better emergency recovery plans or contingency plans on suppliers, risk mitigation programs with suppliers. What happens if that plant goes down? Where are they going to produce the product? So yeah, I agree with everything that Bruce said. It's going to create a whole different set of thinking.
Thank you. I just had a question come in for Ken. Ken, do you know, has Honeywell actually started hiring in Phoenix those 500 employees that are needed to make those additional masks?
Well, I mean, we've got open requisitions. Yes, we do. We are actively hiring both for those roles and other roles as well. So absolutely.
Great. And on that note, a question I have. Just collaboration, guys, with everything going on, the need to collaborate, and any advice you have for organizations, maybe especially here in the greater Phoenix area, on collaborating as we go through this crisis together and as we look for solutions, actionable solutions. Just what you have seen or what you have noticed as far as collaborating with maybe organizations or entities you didn't before.
Well, I'll take that one. I think what I've seen is that the business community here in Phoenix has been very helpful. I've developed over the course of a few years here a number of friendships and relationships with folks who are either CEOs or other executives in other parts of companies, and very free sharing of information about what people are up to, how they're dealing with this, and it generates, I think, a lot of good ideas, and that sharing of learnings, I think, accelerates how we can solve some of the problems that we all face. But I think the openness that I've seen of the business community to share their thoughts, that share what they've learned and mistakes they've made, I think has been very helpful.
Yeah, it's an example of what we're doing right now, all sharing what we're going through. Mark, your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would, I'm not in that area. I think Bruce handled that. I would take a different slant on that and say that I think it's going to improve the communication and cooperation and partnerships between customers and suppliers. I think there's got to be a tighter connection, a tighter partnership between them based upon this. And I think we'll see that in the future.
Specific question here for Ken. It's an aerospace question. How attractive is the greater Phoenix area to the domestic and international aerospace manufacturing communities as a location for new facilities?
Well, I mean, I think our footprint kind of speaks for itself. We have 14 sites ourselves in the Phoenix area. I mean, it's a fantastic area, and I think it was Bruce earlier was highlighting. I mean, it's a great place for talent of all different varieties, and it's been great for us in aerospace. I mean, this is our Honeywell Aerospace headquarters location. No, I think it's great for talent, great spot for business.
That's great. And Mark, I'll bring you, and forgive me guys, I'm reading these cold as they come in. At what point does the concept of just-in-time inventory harm the ability to respond to these events? If there's no inventory to get in time, you completely stop. Will this be revisited or held inventory revisited?
Well, that's a great question. And I think Bruce touched on it earlier about inventories and working capital. It depends on the company with their cash position. Carlisle benefited by having, I'll call it, optimal inventories at certain locations. So we were able to survive. Obviously, if you're doing daily replenishments and you might have a problem. So I think it's a trade-off between working capital and inventory positions. And, certainly you reduce working capital by having daily replenishments, but then if something like this happens, you have no safety stock and no surplus to fall back on. So it really depends on the working capital position of the company.
Yeah, I think I would answer it maybe just a little bit differently, but certainly there's always that trade-off between inventory and working capital. But I've been fully indoctrinated in the inventory is evil, and to be honest, even in these situations, I think you got to be really smart about where you put your working capital and where you want to spend your money. My view is I would rather have and I think to the same tune that Mark and Bruce have hit on earlier, I'd rather have a diversified global supply base that I know I could, if I couldn't pull on one supplier, I could pull on another. If I couldn't make it in one location, I know I could pull it from another. I would rather spend my money on that than working capital, than inventory. I mean, I think it gives you the ability to respond to market swings. And this certainly isn't a market swing. This is certainly bigger than the market swing. But you know, to me, that's where smart money is in diversification, and a very robust business continuity plan. I think 10 times out of 10.
Bruce, I'll give you a shot at that one.
Just to add to that, I think it will force most folks to take a hard look at their supply chain and where their greatest risks are. And if they have critical raw materials that are not multi-sourced, those might be the ones you'd be willing to spend some money on in your on inventory.
And we're going to wrap things up here in just a few moments. But you know, it was interesting as I was researching all of you, spending time on your websites. You know, all of your organizations have been in business for over 100 years. And some of you even have timelines of sort of the things and challenges that your businesses have had to overcome. Natural disasters, wars, stock market crashes, recessions. And here we are in the midst of another crisis. So how do we recover from this, and what's on the horizon here? And I know that's kind of a big, broad question, but I'll just kind of open it up, and I'll let us close here with each one of you getting some of your final takeaways here.
Well, I'll take it first. First and foremost, I think it's really part of the culture of each of the companies. I mean, I think you mentioned all of us have been around for quite a long time. We've been around since 1832. And I think the DNA is the resiliency, the willingness to try things, the willingness to take control when you need to take control. One of the things that we saw very clearly in this episode with the coronavirus is at setting high level philosophical policy and so forth, but letting that then filter down through the organizations where the ownership and the execution is at the local level. That's where the action is. That's where the work needs to get done. And that's where people are most knowledgeable about what the critical issues are and can respond. And I think there's a level of trust that you need to develop in your organization, that people have the ability to do what it is that needs to get done. And that's how I think all three companies here have survived as long as they have and have prospered. It's that innovation that happens with our employees, willingness to take risks and make decisions and drive forward. That's how you survive.
Thanks, Bruce. Ken, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, look, I mean, we're faced with a challenge that we haven't seen in many lifetimes. And this one's certainly unique. But I think what's exciting about it is the way the world's responding. I mean, you know, we talked about collaboration even within our companies, but the collaboration even globally now to try to find a cure, to work across borders, to try to keep, you know, critical infrastructure and things that we as humans need around the world, I think is a bit refreshing to see, as opposed to, you know, maybe some of the way things were progressing just prior to this. So hopefully, I think coming out of it, you know, it's anyone's speculation as to the path. I mean, we have our view as to how long this is going to take and the view of a recovery. You know, I don't think anyone expects this to bounce back and everything's going to turn back to normal. I think it's definitely going to be a new normal, and it's going to take some time for many of these, especially small companies, to recover. But even the large ones are. I mean, everybody has there's a price being paid, and it's going to be a tough road. But I do think it's exciting. I mean, the silver lining here is the way folks are rallying around finding a solution to business challenges of today, as well as what we're doing to try to be, everyone trying to be part of the solution. I mean, that just about every company, you can see some really, really great things going on to try to solution the problem as we work to find a permanent answer.
Thanks, Ken. Mark, some closing thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with both Bruce and Ken. I think the businesses that survive will be stronger, more integrated, closer knit. I mean, we have seen at Carlisle, you know, numerous cases where, you know, plants have helped one another, departments within a plant have cooperated to get things done quicker. And that's become the new norm. I mean, why does it take 6 months to qualify a supplier? We just did it in 10 days, you know, under duress. So we can do those things. So I think we're going to be actually better companies. A lot of the red tape and the bureaucracy is going to be gone because we can't afford it anymore. And we're just going to go ahead and do business and eliminate a lot of that. So I see the companies being stronger and because of this.
All right, Mark Smith, Vice President of Supply Chain, Carlisle Companies, Ken Stacherski, Vice President of Supply Chain, Honeywell, and Bruce Hoechner, President and CEO of Rogers Corporation. Thank you all so much for spending the hour with us today. I want to say, of course, special thank you to GPEC, the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, for hosting this virtual series. If you want to check out more resources, gpec.org. On their website, they have resources for business, including advanced insight into some help for some small businesses right now. We will close today's seminar. I want to remind everybody, next week's seminar, webinar, Community in Action, will be April 16th. That'll be from 2 to 3 o'clock. And the team over at GPEC will be sending that invite out shortly for everyone. Want to close today. Want to say thank you to all of our participants for watching, for spending the hour with us. Be sure to join us next week again for that regional report.